Morning. Welcome back to the wood shop. It's a little chilly out here this morning, but not too bad. I wanted to bring you out to the shop today, just to bring you up to speed on a couple things going on out here. But we've got a story for you today. But before we get to that, some of you will remember this little stack of wood I mentioned before. I've got these little sticks between it so the air can get through. This wood, I sawed it off with a bandsaw off of a big chunk. And I'm not sure what kind of wood it is. It's got a funny looking grain and coloring. But it's hard. It's really hard. And when I took a piece of it off, immediately overnight that stuff started to warp and bow. So I put it in these clamps with the sticks between it and let it cure a little bit so the air could get through it. Well, this week we're going to take that apart. We're going to start making a box out of it. And I'm not going to do that on camera because it's a long process for me. I have to take my time because I make mistakes and all that. But I wanted to show you that. But I've made some modification in the shop. Of course, I'm always doing some kind of modification to make things what I think might be more efficient. Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. For one thing, I had the bandsaw sitting here, and you can see it over my shoulder. I moved it over to the other side. And the reason I did that, I needed some kind of table saw for certain things that I like to do. And I had gotten rid of my table saws because they didn't work for what I had as far as the shop space. And but I bought a job site table saw that it's lightweight so you could carry it around. And I built a heavy stand for it and fastened it to this heavy bench so they don't move around. But I can lift the saw off if I should need to or want to take it outside or take it somewhere to use it. Not that I probably ever will, but it fit my need here because of space and power and all that sort of thing. And I've used it just a little bit in the last 2 or 3 days, just getting things set up. And I'm really liking it. For one thing, if I pull material through it, it sits about 1/4 inch higher than my workbench here. And so my workbench acts as an outfeed table for it. But then on the other end of the workbench is that chop saw you've seen before. And the wood, long pieces you lay on there to chop, it also feeds across my workbench. So it's just one big, long, continuous, big, long as in 8 or 10 feet, 9 feet, more like 8 to 9 feet there. But it's all the space I've got, and there's not an inch to spare. Everything starts at that back door, and that saw sits right up against that end of the bench. This saw sits right up within an inch of it. It has to have a little bit of space because of this fence it travels. And so I've got room for that. But other than that, it's right. And then, of course, it comes right out to my door. In fact, it sticks out about an inch over the door. But that's okay. I can deal with that. But anyway, I think the workflow for small stuff is going to be a lot better. And this gives me the ability to do some things with a table saw that I had trouble with. I couldn't do them on the bandsaw or the chop saw. And to do it by hand, yeah, I could do it, but I couldn't do it very clean or accurate. But anyway, that's enough of that. I'll tell you a little story about mules and little boys and broken arm. I was in the 5th or 6th grade, 7th grade maybe, and Dad had me in the fields with a turning plow. I don't know if you know what that is. It's a plow that rolls the dirt over, and you do that to get started prepping it for disking and seeding and all that sort of thing. And he started me down in the corn ground, which is loose ground, and I was too small to handle the plow, but it set up pretty good on its own. You just kind of had to keep it from completely falling over. When it's good ground, it'd run along real smooth. but we was plowing rocky ground, and so I was too little to handle it good, and so I was dancing in and out of the furrow all over the place. And I wasn't big enough if you get to the end to pull it back, so I'd have to stop the mules and make them turn it very gently to start down the other side. Well, we had a field up next to the schoolhouse on the end of the farm. It was the fescue sod. And it was been there for years, maybe who knows how many years. But that was a real solid fescue sod. And it was getting late in the summer sometime. I don't remember what time of year it was, but the ground was already getting good and dry and hard. But in that field, there had been a little hill there with a bunch of trees and brush and stuff. And Dad had hired a dozer to come in and break that down and level it out. And of course, they pushed the brush off, and I don't remember if they burned it or what. But he sent me up there to break that out. And schoolhouse was right at the end of that field. And I had to take off school for 2 or 3 days to plow that. And I mean, that fescue, it was just turning up in big old clumps. It wasn't breaking up and crumbling like you'd like to have it to. And boy, it was leaving an awful rough ground in there. And every once in a while in that one little patch, there's some of those roots still up close to the surface, and you'd hang in one of them roots and they'd stop the mules for a second, and or maybe just temporarily stop, then they'd go on through it. And I was getting gouged in the belly and everything with the plow handles. And the school teacher came down there one day during the recess to talk to me. And I was about 100 yards from the schoolhouse. He come down there and he said, "Stevie, you need to be careful." And I said, "You'll get wind up with a hernia, them plow handles hitting you in the stomach and ribs like that." And so anyway, he went on back to school, and I continued plowing. Got that plowed up, and it started drying out in a few days, and you couldn't get over it with a horse-drawn disc or anything. It's too rough. And so we had a couple of what we call barn seals. It's the seals that you put on top of rock, built of the old style barns, and they were about 8 by 8 or 8 by 9 and 8 foot long. And we chained 2 of them together, just pulled them together and put chains around them and hooked a double tree in for the mules to pull crossways. And we was using that to drag that plowed ground. And it did a pretty fair job. And even if it was sod, it would have really done a good job if it had been corn ground. But anyway, I was up there with those mules, and it got long mid-afternoon, and the mules are just climbing up and down over that clod, that big old broken, and they'd step in the holes, and it was hard work. And they got so they would just stop without me telling them to. And of course, I didn't have any platform to move around on. It was just about 16 inches wide or so. And of course, unexpected, and then they'd stop and I'd step off of that. And I'd been stepping out on the double tree and stuff there, and then put my hand on the mule's hips and get myself back up. And I'd speak to them and go on. And they did this several times, and I was starting to get aggravated with them. It's getting way on down toward milking time, and wanted to finish that. And but the mules wasn't getting no better off. They was getting more tired. Though it wasn't much left to finish, you know. I thought, well, we get this done. And they did it again. And instead of stepping out on that double tree, excuse me, I stepped out to the left off to the other side of this mule. And when I did, I set one of them holes. And it went plumb up to my waist nearly in that. And then the mule started on. Well, I couldn't get out of the hole quick enough. And they pulled that big drag up over me and shoved me down, had one arm up behind me. And I was yelling, whoa. And I shouldn't have done that, because then they did whoa. And then I couldn't get out, it didn't seem like. And so I was hollering at them to go, and they wouldn't do that. They said, nope, we're just going to stand here. Well, there I was buried in that dirt. And but it was sort of soft, and I kept wiggling and working around. Boy, that arm was hurting. And I finally got myself out from under that hole, and that one arm was hanging down. I could tell it was messed up. I just left them mules standing there in the field. I headed for the house. It was probably 400 or 500 yards maybe more, back to the house. And I went just kind of trotting in that arm hanging and kind of half crying. And Dad saw me coming from the house, and he come down off the bank there, across the road and across the little branch there, and met me out there in the field. And I said, I think they broke my arm. We didn't even go to the house. He took me and put me in a truck there at the foot of the bank. Took me to Liberty. And they set my arm without putting me out. They put an ether mask over my face. But that crazy nurse was pulling it downward and pinching my nose off. And I was trying to push it up, and she was pulling it down. She nearly smothered me to death instead of putting me out. They set the arm. But anyway, the arm set. And the next year, I messed around and let a cow break the other arm. Back to town. Might have had the dates reversed. I might have got the broken arm from the cow the year before, the mules. But working with livestock is it's rewarding, but it's dangerous stuff. You can get hurt quick, you can get hurt bad. But the difference is, it's not if you're going to get hurt. If you mess with livestock, you're going to get hurt. It's just a matter of when and how bad. Well, anyway, there's some more mule stories around, and maybe I'll bring one of them up one of these days. But for now, this is Steve, story time. Next time, don't know when that'll be, but we'll see you around. Thanks for the time.